They say the past is behind you. They say time heals, the memories fade, that what is over is over. But for some people, that the past does not sit quietly behind them. It echoes, it replays in the quiet moments, before sleep, during silence, in between conversations. A sentence you should have said differently, a mistake that feels heavier than it did years ago, a look on someone's face you can't forget. Why does the mind rewind what the body has already survived? Eyes, why do certain memories refuse to dissolve, even when you've moved forward on the surface? There is a quiet epidemic of people living half in yesterday. Not because they want to, but because something unfinished still lives there. Tonight, this reflection explores the psychology of those who replay the past in their mind, what it protects, what it fears, and what it quietly longs for. Let's begin. There are people who look completely functional from the outside. They work. They answer messages. They laugh at the right moments, and yet, somewhere behind their eyes, a quiet film is always playing. A conversation from 3 years ago, a mistake from 10, a door that closed without explanation. The mind does not simply remember it, it replays it, again and again. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly enough to stay invisible to everyone else. You might notice it in small moments, when silence falls, when you're driving, when you are about to fall asleep. The scene appears, uninvited, and suddenly you are no longer here. You are there, replaying tone, replaying facial expressions, replaying what you should have said. Why does the mind rewind something that cannot be edited? At first, it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like thinking, reflecting, processing. It feels responsible, but slowly reflection becomes repetition. Repetition becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. You begin to believe this is just how your mind works. Yet what makes this pattern so isolating is that no one sees it. From the outside, you seem calm. Internally, it is like standing beside a river that never stops carrying yesterday downstream. Some people replay joyful memories, but even those can ache. A moment of laughter that cannot be recreated. A version of yourself that felt lighter. A time before something changed. The mind doesn't always replay pain. Sometimes it replays longing, and longing can be just as heavy. Why does one memory dissolve while another stays sharp like glass? Because memory is not stored equally. It is filtered through emotion. The brain highlights what felt unfinished, what felt threatening, what felt defining, and so you revisit it. Not because you enjoy it, but because something inside you still believes there is something to extract from it. A lesson, a correction, a sense of control. Replaying the past can feel like holding a remote to your own history. If you watch it enough times, maybe you will finally understand it. Maybe you will finally soften it. Maybe you will finally forgive yourself. But the strange truth is this. The more you replay it, the more emotionally alive it becomes. The body does not know the difference between memory and present danger. It reacts. Your chest tightens, your stomach drops. You are reliving, not remembering. And yet you continue. Why? Because somewhere along the way, your mind learned that going back meant staying safe. If you anticipate every mistake you ever made, perhaps you won't repeat it. If you dissect every interaction, perhaps you won't be rejected again. The mind that rewinds believes it is preparing you, but preparation quietly becomes imprisonment. You start to measure your present through the lens of what once happened. You hesitate more. You analyze more. You trust less. Not because you are weak, but because your nervous system learned that vigilance is survival. There is no visible alarm, no external crisis, just quiet loops. And perhaps the most painful part is this. You do not replay everything. You replay the moments that shaped how you see yourself. The failure that became your inner label. The rejection that became your silent fear. The argument that still echoes in your chest. When the mind rewinds, it is not chasing the event. It is chasing meaning. It is trying to rewrite a story about who you are. But stories do not change simply because you replay them. They deepen. The river carves the stone not because it is powerful, but because it returns again and again. And so the question is not why you remember. The question is, what is your mind still trying to protect you from? Long before the replaying became a habit, it was a strategy, not a conscious one, not something you chose, but something your nervous system quietly learned. And there's often a moment, early in life, when the mind discovers that reviewing the past feels safer than facing the unknown. A child who was criticized for small mistakes, a teenager who was misunderstood in a vulnerable moment, a young adult who experienced rejection without explanation. When something painful happens and there is no closure, the mind does not file it away neatly. It keeps it open, like a tab in a browser that never closes. Not because it enjoys the discomfort, but because unfinished experiences feel dangerous. If you grew up in an environment where emotional safety was inconsistent, your mind may have developed a habit of scanning for errors. What did I do wrong? What should I have said? How could I have prevented that reaction? For some, replaying began as self-correction, an attempt to improve, an attempt to avoid future humiliation. But beneath improvement is something quieter. Fear. The fear of being caught off guard again. The fear of being blindsided by someone's disappointment. The fear of losing connection without understanding why. When a child feels confusion after conflict, they often internalize responsibility. They replay conversations in their mind not because they are self-absorbed, but because they are trying to restore stability. If I can decode what happened, maybe I can prevent it next time. This is how rumination begins. Not as obsession, but as protection. The brain learns that reviewing the past equals control, and control equals safety. Over time, this becomes automatic. You do not decide to replay, it simply happens. Because somewhere deep inside, there is an old imprint that says, understanding the mistake will keep you safe. But what if there was no clear mistake? What if the rejection wasn't yours to carry? What if the silence you keep dissecting was never about you? When emotional wounds lack resolution, they do not fade. They sediment. Like layers of silt at the bottom of a river, small moments accumulate. A teacher's harsh comment, a parent's withdrawal, a partner's sudden distance. Individually, they may seem minor. Collectively, they shape your internal narrative. You begin to believe that vigilance is wisdom, that reviewing is responsibility, that letting go is careless. But what if replaying is not wisdom, but fear disguised as analysis? Sometimes the mind replays because it never received reassurance. No one said, and it wasn't your fault. No one said, you were enough. No one explained what truly happened, so the brain keeps searching for an answer that never arrived. In families where emotions were minimized, children learned to solve problems internally. They became their own investigators, their own judges, their own historians, and historians do not let events pass easily. They document, they revisit, they annotate. The problem is not memory itself, it is the emotional weight attached to it. Or if a memory still carries shame, it remains active. If it still carries confusion, it remains open. The mind revisits what feels unresolved, not to punish you, but to finish something that never felt finished. Yet the tragedy is this: some events cannot be solved by revisiting them. Some questions have no satisfying answer. And still, the brain insists. Because once upon a time, going back meant surviving. It meant preventing future harm. It meant staying prepared. But what protected you at 7 may imprison you at 27. What kept you alert in chaos may keep you anxious in peace. The mind that replays is rarely weak. It is usually hyper-responsible. It believes that if it watches carefully enough, nothing will hurt you again. But pain does not always come from mistakes. Sometimes it comes from being human, and being human cannot be edited. The mind does not replay the past because it enjoys suffering. It replays because it believes it is solving something. There is a quiet illusion inside rumination, the illusion of control. When you revisit a memory, it feels active. It feels productive. It feels like you are doing something, but what are you actually doing? The human brain is designed to detect threats, long before it was designed for happiness. Deep inside, the amygdala scans your environment and your memories for patterns of danger. Anything that once caused pain is flagged, not erased, not softened, flagged. When a memory carries strong emotion, shame, fear, embarrassment, rejection, the brain stores it with heightened intensity. It becomes easily retrievable, like a file marked urgent. So when your mind replays that conversation from years ago, it is not random. It is your nervous system whispering, learn from this, prevent this, do not let this happen again. On the surface, this seems intelligent, but the brain confuses familiarity with safety. If you keep revisiting the same memory, it begins to feel known, predictable. And predictable feels safer than uncertainty. This is the protective illusion. You believe that by analyzing the past thoroughly enough, you will gain mastery over it. You change your tone in the memory. You adjust your response in your imagination. You picture a better ending. But the body does not register imagination as completion. It registers emotion, and each time you replay the event, you reactivate the emotional circuitry. Your heart rate shifts, your muscles tense, your chest tightens slightly. The body believes it is happening again. This is why rumination is exhausting. It is not just thinking, it is reliving. And yet, the mind insists. Why? Because unfinished experiences trigger the brain's Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember incomplete tasks more vividly than completed ones. An unresolved argument, an apology never received, a door that closed without explanation. These are not clean endings. They remain cognitively open. The brain wants closure, but closure does not always come from analysis. Sometimes it comes from acceptance, and acceptance feels passive to a mind trained to prevent harm. There is also another layer. Rumination gives the illusion of moral responsibility. If you keep revisiting what you did wrong, it feels like you are being accountable. It feels ethical, careful. Yeah, but accountability and self-punishment are not the same. Replaying the past does not always improve the future. Often it reinforces an identity. I am the one who failed. I am the one who ruined it. I am the one who wasn't enough. The brain begins to solidify these narratives. Neurons that fire together wire together. Each replay strengthens the pathway. The memory becomes sharper. The self-judgment becomes faster. Over time, you do not need the full memory anymore. On a single trigger, a tone of voice, a facial expression, a moment of silence, activates the entire emotional archive. You react not to the present, but to the echo. This is the quiet tragedy of replaying the past. You believe you are protecting yourself, but you may be teaching your nervous system to stay in danger mode. And danger mode narrows perception. It makes you cautious, hyper-aware, guarded, even when nothing is happening. The illusion of control whispers, if you just think about it one more time, you will finally understand. But understanding does not always soothe. Sometimes it deepens the groove, like a river carving into stone. Not because it is violent, but because it returns. Again and again. The mind that replays is not broken. It is trying to anticipate pain before it arrives, but anticipation cannot eliminate vulnerability. It can only extend it. And so you sit with a memory from years ago as if it still holds the key to your safety, not realizing that safety may not live in yesterday at all. There is a quiet tension inside you. One part wants to move forward. Another part refuses to let go. It feels like standing with one foot in the present and one foot anchored in yesterday. You tell yourself it's time to release it, time to stop thinking about it, time to just move on. But something resists. Because letting go does not feel simple. It feels like betrayal. If you stop replaying that mistake, does it mean it didn't matter? If you stop revisiting that person, does it mean they never shaped you? If you stop dissecting that painful moment, does it mean you've excused what happened? The mind confuses letting go with erasing, and erasing feels dangerous. Some memories feel like warnings carved into stone. Do not trust too quickly. Do not speak too openly. Do not be that vulnerable again. You replay them because they feel instructional. They feel like guardrails, but guardrails can become cages. You may notice this inner war in subtle ways. When something good begins, a memory intrudes. When someone treats you kindly, an old rejection surfaces. When you feel peace, your mind brings up proof that peace can disappear. It is as if your nervous system does not trust calm. Because calm once preceded loss. So you rehearse loss before it arrives. You prepare for abandonment before anyone leaves. This is not pessimism. It is preemptive protection. And yet, protection can quietly poison presence. While you are mentally revisiting what happened 5 years ago, life is unfolding in front of you. But it feels distant, muted. Like trying to watch today's sky through yesterday's fog. There is also guilt woven into this war. Guilt for what you said, and guilt for what you didn't say. Guilt for not knowing then what you know now. You judge your past self with present awareness, but your past self did not have present insight, and still the mind insists on the trial. You become prosecutor and defendant, replaying evidence, re-examining tone, reconstructing timelines, as if justice can be served internally, but sometimes what you call guilt is grief. Grief for who you were. Grief for what you lost. Grief for the version of life that never unfolded. And grief does not dissolve through analysis. It softens through acknowledgement. There is also nostalgia's quieter cousin, the replaying of beautiful moments, the laughter, the connection, the feeling of belonging. You revisit them not because they hurt, but because they glow. And yet, even that glow can sting, because it no longer exists in the same form. You are not just replaying events, you are replaying identities. Yeah, the person you were, the person you thought you would become. Letting go of a memory can feel like letting go of that identity, and identity feels sacred. So the war continues. Part of you whispers, "Stay here, there are answers." Another part whispers, "Come back, there is life." You are caught between preservation and presence, between vigilance and vulnerability, between the illusion of control and the risk of living without constant rehearsal. Perhaps the deepest fear is this. If you stop replaying it, will it happen again? But here's the paradox. Constant rehearsal does not prevent pain. It only keeps it alive. And pain kept alive can overshadow joy. You deserve a present that is not constantly interrupted by yesterday. But the mind does not release simply because you command it. It releases when it feels safe enough to stop guarding. And safety cannot grow in a battlefield between then and now. And there comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when something shifts. Not because the memories disappear, but because you begin to see them differently. You notice the replay starting again, the familiar scene, the same dialogue, the same tightening in your chest. But this time, there is a pause. Instead of diving fully into it, you observe it. And in that small space between memory and reaction, a question arises. What is my mind trying to protect me from? This is the turning point. Not the end of replaying, but the beginning of understanding. You begin to realize that your mind was never your enemy. It was a guard, a loyal one. It replayed that painful conversation because it believed vigilance would prevent humiliation. It replayed that rejection because it believed preparation would prevent abandonment. It replayed that mistake because it believed self-criticism would prevent failure. It was trying to build armor, but armor worn for too long becomes heavy. And heavy armor makes you move through life cautiously, carefully, sometimes too carefully. The quiet realization is this: you are not replaying because you are weak. You are replaying because something inside you once felt unsafe. And instead of collapsing, your mind adapted. It studied the past, it searched for patterns. It tried to master unpredictability. There is something deeply intelligent about that. But intelligence can become overextended. On what once protected you may now be exhausting you. When you begin to see the replay not as punishment, but as protection, shame loosens. The inner critic softens slightly. You stop asking, why can't I just stop thinking about this? And start asking, what still feels unfinished here? Sometimes the unfinished part is not the event, it is the emotion. Maybe no one validated how hurt you were. Maybe you never allowed yourself to feel anger. Maybe you minimized your own pain to stay strong. And so the mind keeps returning. Not for answers, for acknowledgement. It wants you to finally feel what you did not have space to feel then. The sadness, the disappointment, the fear. Emotions that were postponed often return as repetition. And when you allow yourself to sit with the feeling without immediately analyzing it, something subtle happens. The memory loses intensity, not because you forced it away, but because it was finally heard. This is the paradox. The more you fight the replay, the more persistent it becomes. The more you gently witness it, the less urgent it feels. Your nervous system begins to learn something new. You are safe now. You are not that younger version navigating confusion. You are here, in this moment. The turning point is not about erasing the past. It is about updating the present, recognizing that your mind does not need to stay in emergency mode, that the lesson has already been learned. Yet that vigilance can rest, and maybe, just maybe, you can carry memory without living inside it. There is a difference between remembering and residing. For a long time, the past may have felt like a room you could not leave. You walked its familiar corners, touched its familiar walls, replayed its familiar scenes. It felt necessary, but slowly something changes. You begin to understand that memory is not a place to live. It is something to carry, like river sediment. It shapes the water's path, but it does not stop the river from flowing. You do not need to erase what happened. You do not need to pretend it did not matter. You do not need to rewrite history to soften it. You only need to stop standing inside it. When a memory surfaces now, you notice it differently. It is no longer a command, it is information. It says, this once hurt. Not, this is happening again. The body slowly learns the difference. The chest does not tighten as sharply. The stomach does not drop as suddenly. Because you are no longer reliving. You are witnessing. There is a quiet maturity in this. You can look at a past mistake and see a younger nervous system doing its best. You can look at rejection and see two imperfect humans, not a personal verdict. You can look at an ending and see timing, not failure. Carrying memory without living inside it does not mean forgetting. It means integration. Yet the memory becomes part of your story, not the entire script. It becomes a chapter, not the headline. And perhaps the deepest release comes when you stop asking the past to change. Some events will never feel fully satisfying. Some apologies will never arrive. Some questions will remain unanswered. But you do not need perfect closure to move forward. You need permission. Permission to let the river flow without constantly checking the stones beneath it. Yet a permission to trust that you are no longer the same person standing in that old moment. Because you are not. You have grown in ways the memory does not update. And when you begin to see that growth, something softens. The mind no longer needs to rehearse survival. It can rest. It can be present. Not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer defines your safety. The past shaped you. It does not own you.